the Chief Executive, have all said they never brought this to my attention.
Well, not quite right, because Diana Kavanagh said in that note in relation to the 11th of April meeting that you would have been given the minutes or the actions. So it's not quite right about Diana Kavanagh. But insofar as the excellent Ian Davey is concerned, he certainly never brought anything to your attention?
No, and I think he's told the inquiry that, yes.
And Mary Moffat, who was, we have heard, very well briefed on all the issues, a political colleague, and I do emphasise a political colleague, Mr. Farnell, again, she never brought any of this to your attention.
No, she didn't, no.
Because although you may be right that the directors of the departments had a responsibility in terms of the hierarchy and how the council worked, in the end, Mary Moffat, who was your erstwhile deputy and education chair throughout the whole period, she was bound to have told you. She was bound to have told you, Mr. Farnell, wasn't she?
Well, that's your supposition. What I'm saying
it's my suggestion, Mr. Farnell.
Well, your suggestion. My answer to that is she did not raise it with me.
So do you agree that by combination of your chief executive, John Pearce, your borough solicitor at the time, the town clerk, David Shipp, your director of education, Diana Kavanagh, your director of social services, Ian Davey, and every one of your political colleagues and the opposition who were in the know, not one of them breathed a word throughout the whole period of your leadership? But Mr. Farnell, you're not being realistic. You're focusing on responsibility. Let's just imagine that the scandalous behaviour had been picked up by the national press. And as Richard Farnell walks up the steps into Rochdale Town Hall one day, you are doorstepped by a national journalist who wants your comment on the goings-on at Knollview because it's been leaked to him. Are you honestly saying the next day, when you've been left completely unsighted and completely exposed, you're not going to walk up to Mary Moffat and say, did you know? And when she says yes, is the next question not going to be, well, why on earth didn't you tell me?
I probably would have said that, but after I'd been to see the Chief Executive and the Director of Education and the Director of Social Services, why they hadn't told me about it.
On the 17th of May of 1991, there was, as you've probably learned, Mr. Shipp meeting was Director of Legal Services. Was that right?
Yes.
Which was part of Corporate Services, is that right?
I think so, yes.
And Corporate Services reported to the Policy and Resources Committee, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And as you've told us, you were chair of the Policy and Resources Committee.
Yes.
Did Mr. Shipp never report up to you what was going on?
No.
Mrs. Kavanagh told us also that it wasn't just on your behalf as leader that the Mellor report was being commissioned, but also on behalf of Mary Moffat. You remember reading that, presumably, or seeing that?
I think I recall that evidence, yes.
Now, Mrs. Kavanagh told the inquiry in her evidence that she could not imagine, which were her words, she couldn't imagine that Mellor was commissioned without you being in the know. First, because it was commissioned on your behalf. Second, not least, because there would be financial consequences. What do you say about that?
Well, as I've explained before, these matters are delegated to officers. The council is engaging consultants, it's seeking external advice, it approaches QCs for legal advice. All those things are happening day in, day out. And there's a clear delegation to officers of the council that they have the authority to commission that work. They also have a financial delegation in which to pay for it. So those matters would not come before.
Mr. Farnell, that it would have been politically embarrassing for the council, at the very time that the Middleton judgment was handed down, making headlines about cradle snatching, for you to have another scandal on your hands revolving around the sexual activities of Knollview school pupils in and outside the school?
Yes, I think that would be a fair assessment.
Yeah. And not only would it be politically embarrassing for Labour, but those with whom you worked were sufficiently politically astute to have realised that, weren't they? Such as Mary Moffat?
Yes, I would think so, yeah. Yes.
So what did she tell you about Knollview?
I have no recollection of Mary Moffat raising Knollview with me.
So Mary Moffat, who was, for a short period of time during your leadership, your deputy, who was, throughout the whole period of time of your leadership, the education chair, you say you've got no recollection at all of her ever raising Knollview with you?
No recollection whatsoever.
When you say, Mr. Farnell, I, Richard Farnell, have no recollection whatsoever, what does that really mean?
I do not recall Mary Moffat mentioning to me any issues connecting with Knollview.
Is it something, if she had raised it, that you were likely to forget?
If she'd raised it, I wouldn't have forgotten that.
No. So what you're really telling us is she never did?
Yes, I'm saying that, yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So Mary Moffat, in all the years that we know that there were problems at Knollview, never once raised? Not a word?
Not a word.
Not a word?
No.
So she left you, your erstwhile deputy, and your education chair completely and utterly exposed as Labour leader of the council to scandal at Knollview. Is that what you're telling us?
What I'm saying is Mary Moffat's style wasn't to come running to me every 5 minutes with problems within the department. She was a formidable politician in her own right. She got on with the job and she was confident in her own abilities to deal with issues that were put before her.
But just think about what you're saying, Mr. Farnell. You were the leader. She was the education chair. And however formidable she was, any astute politician would not leave the leader unsighted by the kind of issues this inquiry has heard about going on at Knollview between at least 1989 and the time that you lost your seat in the council in May 1992. Is that what you're seriously telling the inquiry?
Yes.
She never brought it to your attention?
She never brought it to my attention.
And nor did anyone else?
No.
Not any single chair of any single committee who sat on your chair's panel? No?
No.
Not the chief executive, John Pearce?
He didn't know.
Not the borough solicitor?
No.
No one?
No one.
So you were completely and utterly oblivious to what was going on at Knollview for all of those years?
All those people you mentioned did not bring that to my attention.
Did anybody else, Mr. Farnell?
No.
No one?
No one.
Is that reality, do you think?
It is what's happened in Knollview.
Is it the truth, Mr.
It is
Farnell?
the truth, certainly the truth.